I mean, I don't think about that like too hard because I feel like my act generally is pretty observational and like my goal is not to like get a huge throng of people mad at me, but I do want to say fucked up things on occasion.
Yeah.
Without consequence, but that's kind of not the gig.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of embrace being a little bit whatever the word might be, provocative or whatever. Just because like that dynamic is funny to me, and I'm becoming more of a nihilist the more I do comedy, and like it doesn't really matter. You start a big fight on the internet, and it doesn't really matter, you know.
Yeah.
You provoke people in a comedy show. What happens? It's just kind of an interesting moment, and then everyone goes away.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of fun. It's like ooh, I'm in trouble, but I like it. It's exciting.
It's a thrill, yeah.
Yeah. Well, because you're the only person I know that's actually over a joke had like what the Homeland Security knock on your door.
Yeah.
What happened with that exactly?
Yeah. Well, see, it's kind of weird, man. It's been a year, and I'm not gonna lie. I mean, there was like something that happened with it where I noticed like, oh, okay, all these people want to interview me about it. I can probably parlay this into like some fucking press and then get things moving around the old Comedy Factory. And they did, and like, you know, whatever. Like, I will be totally open about that because like, I have a lot of anti-capitalist politics, but the first thing people assume is like, well, yet you participate in capitalism. It's like, yeah, I have to. I totally squeezed money out of this because it was weird and it happened to me. But I'm not the first person this has happened to. I feel a little weird talking about it so much because like people want me to. But
you don't have to. That's not the reason I wanted to have you on.
I don't mind talking about it because actually this is what I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Okay,
like the meta nature of it. Because like. Every once in a while, somebody be like, man, you're really, you know, like, exploiting this. And I'm like, yes, I'm being asked to. But it is kind of funny because, like, this happened to Nick Mullen, like, a couple years ago. Like, the FBI came to his apartment over, like a fucking Facebook argument he got in. Like, I think his uncle called the FBI on him.
Wow.
What happened was that he was talking about ISIS. And it wasn't even like, he's like a provocative fucking troll, you know?
Yeah.
But it wasn't even one of his troll things that got him busted. It was just he was talking about ISIS with his uncle. And his uncle was like, why does my nephew know the word caliphate? He must be corrupted. So he called the fucking FBI on him. So it's like happened to people. All of everyone has ever happened to has reached out to me and told me either, you know, well, some of them are normal people.
Sure.
So I'll get some emails that are like, hey, it's the same thing happened to me, you know? And then I've also got like this fucking crazy right-wing libertarian.
Got these like fringe types.
This like white rapper guy named Random keeps just harassing me online because it like happened to him too. And now he thinks that we're like...
You're like brothers in the resistance or something.
We're cosmically linked in some way or something. But anyway, this story is that a year ago I made this joke on Twitter about ICE and it, you know, kind of involved... killing ICE agents in the joke as a mechanism in the joke. And so Homeland Security came and banged on my door and shit. And it was real weird. We had a long conversation. And then I went and I told the story to Catherine Krieger, a reporter at Splinter. And from there, went on like Chapo Trap House podcast. I went on The Majority Report and talked about it a little bit. And then for me, the ending of this little arc story thing was... You know, eventually it was like, well, I guess I'll have to finish this bit. And so I wrote, like, I've fleshed out the bit, and then it turned into, like, a meta bit that's now, like, my closer, or at least it was for last year, where I tell the joke, and then I tell the story of the joke, and of the, you know, cops coming after me and all this stuff.
Sure.
And then that's it. And it's like this one big, you know.
Now when Homeland Security like knocks on your door, is there a moment in your exchange with them where they realize that they're dealing with a comedian and they're not about to like bust like a wanted terrorist or something like that? Yeah,
I think that there was a big moment of deflation when they opened the door, and I think honestly, everything that's going on in those interrogation scenarios is predicated on them intimidating you. And because I was just like hungover and I'm just like a dirtbag comic and I don't really have anything to threaten and I don't value my own life much. I don't have kids and pets and all this stuff. I just answered the door and I was like, you know, what's up? And So I think it was really funny was this big moment of them
You're
going like,
this is gonna be a hard one.
they've got their, their hands over their guns on their hips and stuff. And then I do this. I just presented them with this reaction that I think was kind of like it took all the wind out of their sails. And then we were all just we all just experienced this very like Curb Your Enthusiasm beat. We're like, what now? And then the rest of this interaction is them sort of photographing my apartment and them talking to me and me going, I don't really care, let's do this. Like, I'm not gonna, because they're trained in these situations to intimidate you and extract information to make you incriminate yourself and all this stuff. But I haven't really done anything. And so I was like, listen, I'll talk to you about what, we're here to talk about, but it's a joke, and this is not a consistent thing that you guys enforce. You're not fucking with Alex Jones. At the time, at least they weren't.
Right. Yeah.
Alex Jones hasn't been fucked with by the government, but he's been like deplatformed.
He thinks he has, but
So this is another thing. I get all these right wing like sort of free speech dork comedians, like the Nick DiPaolos of the world.
Sure,
we're all familiar with his new bullshit.
Yeah.
Who think that those guys all think that when they go on stage and they're like, sometimes I'm offensive and it gets me fired from Sirius Radio or whatever, that's free speech infringement. But it's not. Free speech is literally like, I'm one of the only comedians I know that's like, okay, I can even say like, it kind of happened, which is when the government came to me and they were like, we're going to take down this tweet and, fuck you, like, don't do it again or whatever. But like, if you're like a comedian and, Sirius Radio goes, we don't think we can make any money off this, so we're not going to sell it anymore. Yeah. That's their free speech. Like, also, like, anything that happens within the private market is like, you just losing a job isn't you being, censored or whatever.
Being censored. Yeah. And especially now, I feel like comedians that would have been like very edgy at some point in time, I feel like what is sold as edgy, and it's more like marketing. It's more like a marketing decision more than it is like, I want to speak truth to power in PC culture.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like more to me. It's like, I'm going to position myself to appeal to this demographic.
Yeah. I definitely feel like there is like, there's like a pandering element to that. Because, like, if you look at, like, what happened with Louis C.K., right? He was a pretty thoughtful comedian. Yeah. And then suddenly, he's revealed to have done some things. And he takes a moment and he goes, like, I'm going to think about this. And then we all go, I wonder what's going to happen when he's going away and thinking about this. He was just gone for a while.
Yeah. And I feel like most comedians that were fans of his comedy and know him as like this great thoughtful like writer and comic, where like he'll come back and have some great material about this, and then like he'll have reflected or something, and then he'll do all these great bits.
Yeah.
But the jokes that leaked are the kind of stuff that kill on a Saturday night crowd in Long Island.
Yeah.
At a comedy club.
He started pandering to like right wing, suburban fucking comedy club audiences or whatever. Instead of, and the reason it's so frustrating with him is because he knows better.
Yeah, and he can do better.
Yeah, like he could have done something really interesting, and he could have like self-immolated like just his entire career. He's probably got enough money. He could have made some weird denouement end of his career thing about it, and just like left on a big question mark or something. It could have been all this stuff, but like he's a coward, and he wanted to keep just living as if. And this is the thing with so many of these guys. It's like, it's a fantasy. Like, they just want to live as if the world has not changed and it's still when they were in their prime 10 or 20 years ago or whatever. And the things that they're saying are still challenging. That's what's so embarrassing about his new material, is like, it's pandering to people that are kind of socially living in the past. But they think of themselves as being like, no, we're actually, like, as DiPaolo puts it, a breath of fresh air. Like, we're like the subversive, we're actually the new transgressive thing that's like breaking that paradigm. But it's like, no, you're actually like, you're from two paradigms back.
Right. And if you, and in a certain point, most people like their growth of personality or mind wise, like kind of slows. And then there is this new generation that is younger than you with different mindsets that you're not going to, a lot of it you might not jive with. And then that's where you have this like classic friction that's been happening since the beginning of time. It used to be like the idea that, Rock Around the Clock was like a subversive teenage angst song, when now I think you could play it for like a group of kindergartners and no one bats an eye.
Yeah.
But like that, I've thought about that recently, especially with like thinking about Nick DiPaolo, and that like does stand-up comedy just, if you are just like a pure stand-up, does that just drive you to like crack eventually? Like, is there, I've thought about that. Like if I used to think that like, you had to like put there was real value into only focusing on stand-up and not like diversifying or like branching out onto other methods of creativity, because that takes away from the stand-up. But if you're only that, I think you're eventually going to like look up and then the world has changed and you're not going to want to change with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think this happens to all people, but with stand-ups, it's maybe it's hyper accentuated or something, because stand-up is so individual and ego based and stuff like that, and all of these things are problems of the ego. What's going on with a lot of these people is they're freaking out because they're realizing that they are, what they're thinking is no longer on the cutting edge or relevant, and that's where all this anxiety is coming from. But I mean, I don't know, they're also just people that aren't artists at all, that are, obviously he's got an audience. Obviously all these comedians that are like kind of old shitty men are there's an audience for that. So I think this is a thing that all people go through. I think that if you're a person that like creates stuff though, that like you have more of a responsibility to try to keep from stagnating like that and try to stay interesting, because it can be done. I mean, there are people that are like interesting and up to date on everyththing artistically, like up until the day they die. Like Bowie went out just still Bowie. He didn't really, I mean, he's like all over the place, and you can say whatever controversial and stuff, but like
of course, but like he
wasn't making like YouTube videos in his truck,
exactly. He recorded like a pretty good album and while he was sick, and then he died. That's a pretty good way. That's a pretty romantic way to go out, I think. The way I do it is I've almost like over the past several years, like I don't fuck with topical stuff anymore, and I've come to the realization, thinking of my old punk rock bands that I played in and stuff, that I don't have much funny or interesting to say when I try to be political. But what my strength is I can get very personal. I've got a lot of interesting stories to tell, and I understand joke structure. So I'll just I'll dig deeper into myself and try to come up for air, so that I'm not like just so I don't turn into like a performance artist.
Yeah.
But that's I definitely vibe with you on that. And I kind of want to trace this as well and see where you're at with this. You're from Texas.
Yeah.
Where in Texas did you grow up?
I grew up in Houston.
And how is Houston? I've heard lately, I know like the mythos of the Houston comedy scene in the 80s with like what was it, the Comedy Workshop?
Laugh Stop,
I
think. I'm not sure. There have been a few different permutations.
Well, I think
it's closed now.
Yeah, there was that really small club where like Hicks and Ron Schock and Jimmy Pineapple and all those guys, and Carl LeBove and all those guys were like, that was like their creek in the cave, and then before they all moved to LA. So were there any remnants of that when you were growing up?
Well, kind of. I mean, it's complicated because I grew up there, but then I didn't do stand-up until I moved to Austin, which is like the hippie college town.
Yeah, I've spent time in Austin. I like it there.
Yeah, it's the Portland of Texas or whatever, right? Yeah. And so, and then even then, like when I started, I was, in my early 20s in Austin and had very much moved to Austin on purpose, and wanted to hang out with all the burners and stuff and be as weirdo and adult swimmy and psychedelic and stuff as possible. So like when I would go to do stand up in Dallas or San Antonio or Houston, these more traditional cities around it, wasn't really that interested in the scenes that were there at the time. And now I am. I kind of came back around. Now I like anywhere I go, I really like to see what's going on and why the scene is the way it is and all this stuff. But Houston also had a pretty dead scene during the late aughts, early teens or whatever, like when I was doing stand-up down in Texas, because, there was that like Hicks era, and then things just kind of died off, and like a lot of those old guys that were around the Hicks era, like either became gatekeepers of various small kingdoms or like, there's like a guy, Mike McRae, that was kind of from that city, and he just moved to Austin because I think he was just like, there's just better shit going on over there. He's been an Austin guy ever since. He's real funny. And then and then the Laugh Stop closed down, and then that was pretty much the only place you'd really go, to try to like do club sets and stuff. So I kind of didn't think about it. But then after I moved to New York like 5 years ago, these kids started this room called The Secret Group that's like a cool, like it's a music venue during the week, and like it's a proper alt club that everyone like hangs out at. It's very much like creaky,
Okay, so I'm picturing like, hardcore matinees on the weekends and then the alt shows at night kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's kind of mixed, with a music venue, but it's cool. It's not comedy clubs are like kind of dorky, they're kind of corny, and the Secret Group seems to be like a type of place that if I lived in Houston now and I was like 23 and I was thinking about doing comedy, that would attract me to do it. Whereas like the fucking, cheese sticks and an open mic on Sunday thing that would be having at a traditional comedy club probably wouldn't.
Especially for trying to start comedy. You need that like kind of weird like laboratory kind of place compared to the like bringer or like sign up weeks in advance open mic system.
Yeah.
That you would get from comedy clubs, and then maybe you get check spots a couple of years in.
Yeah.
So do you think your sensibilities were shaped somewhat by Houston? Is Houston at the time, was that Houston more of like that traditional Texas kind of city compared to like Austin, or like more in line with Dallas or
yeah, kind of. The thing is, Houston is just like huge, and I think at one point, I can't remember if this has changed or whatever, because population shift or whatever, but it was like the third largest city in the country. And I can't remember if that's population wise or geographically or both or whatever. But like the thing about these big southern cities and they're different than like coastal cities and like, Midwestern metropolises and stuff like that, is that they're huge and spread out. And so there's a million different worlds within the concept of that city. And so like comedy there are like 10 different types of scenes that could exist if they properly aggregate the right audience. And so that's why I think this Secret Group thing happened. And then it just like, yeah, of course, if you made something like that's that cool, people will come and drive out and go hang out at that. But before that, it was comedy clubs, and they were, they just are what they are. Like, I started doing stand-up, like, I don't know, like 12, 13 years ago or something like that. And at the time...
Yeah, that's about when I started.
Yeah?
Yeah, 2007.
At the time, everything was much different. Like, I remember going into it thinking, like, I like stand-up. I grew up watching on TV. But now I'm a cool young adult, and it's kind of lame. But I've got this brilliant idea where I'm going to make it... cool. I'm going to use all the mechanisms of what you do when you start like a DIY indie rock or hardcore space or something. I'm going to take all these things and just shift them one medium over, and then that's like this magic formula I'll have, right? And at the time I was like, no one's doing this, or the comedians of comedy had kind of done it, and I was like, there's all this room for us to do this. This will be great, right? Now... everyone did that in the last 10
that's
years.
That's the rule now.
Yeah, like everyone. But I mean, when I started in Austin, there were fucking 2 clubs. One of them was an improv theater, and it was full of annoying theater dorks. And the other one was a comedy club, and it was full of annoying, strip mall people. And then eventually me and my friends started going around to like venues that we worked at or hung out at. Everyone going, what if we did a fucking show here? What if, here's the pitch or whatever. And then eventually, if I go back to that city now, it's like, it's fucking worse than New York. There's a show in every single like space or venue or coffee shop or bar. Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
And then I sound like an old man when I go back there because I'm like, you guys don't understand. You used to be able to get up once a week,
No, that's how it was when I started outside of Baltimore, and there was the there was Drink Till You're Funny at High Tops, originally Damon's Bar Grill, and then High Tops Backstage Bar and Grill on Sundays. You could do New Talent Night at Magooby's Joke House. If you knew somebody, you could maybe get a guest set at the Baltimore Comedy Factory downtown. The Comedy Factory was always nuts because they would put out these like free $20 all-you-can-drink tickets. So no drink minimums, but just everyone's getting blasted. So I would, and this is the story. We were talking a little bit about you doing a show with Patton. I went to a book signing he did, and he has this great story about performing at the Baltimore Comedy Factory early on in his career. I don't know if you know it, but like some drunk guy like wants to propose to a woman he barely knows, and she says no on stage, and then he's got to continue emceeing the show.
I think I remember this. Yeah.
So I actually was doing a guest set on the morning modern rock station Drive Time Guys show. Guy's named Mickey Cocelli. Super nice guy. He just crushes every time I've seen him. And someone gets engaged on stage at his show, and then he's like giving lap dances to the bachelorette parties. Really playing the part of like your crusher club comedian for the weekend. And I think Patton had this sort of like PTSD reaction. He's like, oh god. when I said Baltimore Comedy Factory, he's like, oh god. So yeah, like you are just trying to. Once or twice a week, and you're working, you have like your one new idea, and you want to see if it goes somewhere, and you're trying to think of a better punchline for your other idea. You're hoping your two jokes that work really well go well, so that you can open big and close big. So this is something I always like to kind of trace, because I feel like you and I, like we don't spend a ton of time together, but I feel like you and I have separate sensibilities, despite the fact that I never look the part of like punk rocker, but that's who I am, like in my core.
There are like a million of us walking around that as soon as you start talking to them, you realize, oh, this person has the same upbringing as me, essentially, but we just look like normal dudes. Because I never wanted to look the part. I just wanted to be it and know the music and play it and be able to play the music. Talking about like the like the anarchist band that has to like participate in capitalism because we're in America. Like I feel like Anti-Flag always butted up against that. I always really liked them when I was younger. Man, what's so weird is I always thought they were like a joke, like Hot Topic. Like they were using the politics as an aesthetic, and like they were huge hacks. Because of their style was so warped tory. And now that I've gotten older, I'm starting to realize I had a bunch of bands like that wrong, and one of them was them. And they're actually like, if you read up on Just Insane, that dude's like politics, he knows his shit. He's like an actual very well-read anarchist. It's really weird. I thought that for sure they're like MXPX or some shit.
Right.
And then like I think
like just paying lip service to the
and then the other flip side of that is that like Against Me was when their first few albums, at least, or their early shit, like the Crime EP and stuff, was so like there were real anarchist bars. Like there was like language in it. You could tell this stuff came ideologically from someone who read up on anarchism. And now they like, well,
they're political in a different way now because of Laura Jane Grace coming out as trans.
Exactly. But I mean, as much as like I'm supportive of all that, and I have a lot of trans friends that are like, this band means so much to me, etc. Like, I mean, there are some bad interviews in the last few years with Laura Jane Grace where like, I think there's a Daily Show interview where I think Trevor Noah was the host at the time, interviews her, and he's, like, we're all big fans here. A lot of people have this, this question though about like the capitalism thing. And, you used to have these more far left radical politics. What's going on with that? And she just goes, yeah, well, you grow up like that, and then sometimes you learn about that stuff so that you can become a better capitalist. And like watching that, the way they edit it, the audience in the show doesn't understand how egregious that is. So they're just like, But I was like, oh my God, like you wrote like this music that was so important to me when I was younger, and that's insane. Like that you would just flip like that. But though, I mean, I'm not going to judge anyone who has gone through,
I understand. I understand completely. Neither would I. Well, and and this is the song, and Frank Turner has another song, because Frank Turner like played in like metal, like hardcore bands before he became like a punk influence, a folk punk guy.
Yeah.
And he has a song like this too. I Was a Teenage Anarchist is like Against Me's, like that to me is their song of like re-examining their political thoughts on anarchy specifically. And I'm not well read on it at all as far as like a system of belief. So if I speak out of turn, correct me.
Oh, I mean, I'm not either. None of us.
Well, if we were too organized, that's not
trying,
anarchy.
But I'm not. I never feel like a particular authority or
yeah. I can't wait for someone to call me a poser when I post this.
Yeah, who cares?
I don't
Some
give a
fucking person on
I don't give
Twitter
a shit,
with a little
dude.
hammer and sickle next to their name.
Well, there's that like, so I Was a Teenage Anarchist is like, she is like that song is like the revolution was a lie, and like, and Frank Turner has that similar song on Love, Ire, and Love. I think it's I can't remember the name of the album, but he has a similar album about like being kind of dissuaded by the cause and like putting his pamphlets away. He has or a line about hanging up his banner and stuff. And
yeah, that sucks.
For me, I had this moment where I realized that punks can be as close-minded as the people that they are rebelling against. It's just in a different way.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, that's like...
And the lack of self-awareness, like, kind of... That's why I was like, I'll listen to the music, but I'm not going to, like, spike my hair or stud my jacket.
But that's, like, another thing that, like, if you're involved or interested in punk stuff for like a good 6 months, I think you'll figure that out. Like people always say that to me as if it's supposed to blow my mind. It's like I figured that out in 8th grade. Oh no, I'm rock. Not... it's like a uniform all on its own. It's like duh,
Yeah.
But it's...
Oh no, I'm not trying to blow your mind. I'm just saying I figured this out. When did you? Did you figure?
I didn't mean that in reference to you. I just mean that in terms of being like a paradigm that you're supposed to hit and then change from there. I guess. I don't disagree with that as a concept at all, and it's very funny. And obviously, like anyone punk is a funny thing because it's just from the past. So, like anyone that's like that dresses like a hardcore 1970s punk and like lives in New York, you're like, yeah, you spent $1,000 on that outfit. It's a costume, yada yada yada. Punk music to me is very much like, I don't know. I like the music, but also. I feel this way about every fucking person in a band I meet. The politics often seem to be an aesthetic. It's most people are pretty bad at it, but every once in a while you meet someone and they are a real head, and then you go, okay, that's fine. I just consider them kind of two different things.
It's part of the I've learned this phrase packaging. That just becomes part of your overall aesthetic of your band.
And I mean,
sometimes that's who you are also. But
I think that there is a healthy amount of clowning on people for using punk and anti-capitalist stuff as an aesthetic without understanding it, and that absolutely should exist. Like you should be sort of ribbing those people until they actually do their homework, because it's like no one in this world actually wants to eat their vegetables or whatever, and it's super lame when there's big movements in something like punk music where like, it turns into the Vans Warped Tour, and it's like, how did this turn into like a bubblegum, teeny bopper thing that's extremely capitalistic and like, yeah, fuck that. Like, when that happens, everyone should clown on those people, and then you should start something new. And I don't really know even. I mean, I love like punk music, but I don't even know what I would say is like, is punk that's happening right now, other than like obscure folk punk like Days and Days and stuff like that.
Yeah, that might be the closest thing. I don't know if like the Casualties are still around. I feel like
they are. My friend David is actually singing for them right now.
Really?
Yeah. So there was this guy Davey Tejas was in a band called the Crumb Bums in Austin, and he was also a cook at Cap City Comedy Club, which is where I used to do open mics.
Right.
So he's part of both the punk and comedy world down there, and somehow is singing for the Casualties right now.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's mind blowing. It's really small world. I love Cap City. That's one of my favorite rooms I've played. I love that space.
Yeah.
So like, I have this idea of who you were like as a teenager growing up. So when you're like in high school in Houston, driving around, like, are you like the punk rock kid in your high school?
Kind of. I think, high school is funny because when it's happening, it feels like it's forever. And then you look back on it and you realize over the course of 4 years, I was like 10 different people. Mm-hmm. And, my first year of high school, I lived in Houston, and it's important to point this out about Houston, and even the part of it that I lived in is we're talking about Texas, right? But also Houston's this big city, and I lived in the southwest side of it in a less like white and suburban area than most people. Uh-huh. When you talk to like a white person that's from a city, a lot of times what's going on is they say, I'm from Baltimore, and you go, oh, what part? And they're like, oh, it's this suburb that's right outside of Baltimore, right? And that's like, yeah, that's very common in Houston because like it's white flight happened, and then white people moved to all these weird like suburbs like Friendswood and Katy and Cinco Ranch and all this stuff.
Sure.
I'm from this place called A-Leaf, which is like in Southwest Houston, yada yada yada. But like, there's still like fucking crazy good like rap music coming out of it and stuff because it was where like shit was actually going down. Mm-hmm. And so I went to a middle school that they had this like lottery system where you just get picked and you go to one of the three big fucking high schools. And so I got picked to go to this school called Hastings. And for the first year I was in the big fucking crazy, like dangerous high school. And, I'd say in my ninth grade, I was kind of what my friend Noe would refer to as a wiener kid. That's what he called all the kids that went to, Hot Topic and bought like bondage pants and stuff and like bought a little fucking Dayglow uniform and shit. And we're like, doing this thing we're talking about, just being kind of whatever poser or whatever. And, but I was like, learning about all this stuff and like getting into punk music. It's just that when you're first starting, it's a million different things at the same time. And then actually, so the next year I went to a magnet school because my older siblings had gone to it. And, at the time, I thought that college was going to be an important thing in life. Now, on the other end of it, extremely dumb. But there's a magnet school, which is not a private school. It's just another school that's smaller that you apply to get into. And if you can get into it, then it's like you maybe are going to have a better shot at getting into a college or. Because like if you're in the top 10%, you're like automatically accepted into state schools in Texas or something. And also, but it was a completely. It also kind of melted my brain because it was a complete fuck off school because it was like an experimental like Montessori-ish sort of thing where it's like
right, one of those like create your own like, oh, you want to major in bubbles, you can do that.
Yeah. Mostly in that like you didn't have a classroom, they give you a big fucking pack, like a workload at the end, and then you had the entire month to fill it out, and then it was like go hang out in the fucking common room and do whatever you want. Right? Yeah. So everyone cheated, and that is why I went from being a crusty wiener kid, like punk guy, to I spent a good couple years pretty goth in high school. Yeah, because there was an art room I could just hang out in and be a fucking weirdo, you know.
I could see that. Yeah, those were the people I was pretty close to those people when I was in high school. My first serious girlfriend in college was. She didn't go full goth when we were together, but after we broke up, she went the full goth. So I'm glad I missed that phase. But again, we're talking like Evanescence goth. So
yeah, all goth. Well, yeah,
it's like I have seasonal affective disorder.
Goth is like one of the funniest of the subcultures, though, because like, I mean, you'll sit around with like punk people and credibility is so important to them, and they'll be like, no, fuck you. I've actually read all the Murray Bookchin and stuff like that, and I'm fucking into, I'm going to go fight in Rojava. I'm an anti-capitalist, all this stuff. But with goth, there's not really a pretense of it being a real like thing.
Because no one understands like
it's just goofy.
The actual history of like Gothic architecture, that whole like.
Well, it also has nothing to do with really being a teenager and wanting to dress in all black and kind of be spooky. Like, there's no one's going to be like, you've never read about the actual Visigoths or whatever. There's no connection to it. It's just
right. How many Aleister Crowley quotes do you have memorized?
Yeah.
Okay, man. So, okay, and what was your home life like during that time? What were your parents up to? And how many siblings do you have?
Okay, so I have an older brother and an older sister. I'm the youngest.
You're youngest, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, we grew up like a little bit more poor than other like. Well, I mean, it depends because I don't know. I grew up and went into the arts, right? So everyone that I talk to that is my peers now grew up kind of richer than me, and that's why like class politics are really interesting to me, because eventually I figured out, oh, something's different here, and I never knew fucking what it was, and now it's like, okay, that's interesting. But but also, I mean, I grew up around people that were poorer than me. I mean, there was like just a black apartment building next to mine that like, I lived in a small house.
Yeah.
And like all the black kids would go walk, and if you want to go hang out with your black friend, you would walk to the Hawthorns, and then you'd walk into their apartment and go like, you live here with your family in an apartment? And I live in a house. Wow, that's fucking weird,
You start kind of putting those together.
Yeah, and so like I don't know. I mean, I never know where to place myself on the totem pole when I'm telling this story to people, because I don't know who's hearing it and what they can relate to, what they were living like when they grew up. But I don't know. I always preface this like by trying to make that apparent, because I feel like people are so insensitive when they tell stories about their youth, and they're like, how we all grew up in a big house and went to summer camp and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. I always try to be very conscious of what my experience was, and that it might not be the same as yours. Even to the point like I've gotten to travel a lot over the past like 5 years, but I don't try to bring it up all the time, because I feel like a fucking asshole.
Well, it's also like fine though. Like, you're not an asshole for just having a life. But what's always funny to me is when people go, well, you're hanging out with me, and therefore we all had this experience. Like, one thing that's interesting in comedy to me is the movie Wet Hot American Summer, and how it is like such a big deal to so many people. And forever I couldn't figure out, like, why is this so beloved by so many people in the area that I'm trying to work in, right?
Sure.
And then eventually I was like, oh, all these motherfuckers went to summer camp when they were kids, and I didn't. So I don't get these jokes, or really like what's the subtext, or like what's so interesting and cutting about it.
Yeah.
But the attitude about it is never like, do you like Wet Hot American Summer? It's always like, comedians are always like, we love Wet Hot American Summer, right? The assumption
I've never seen it.
Is I mean, I get, like, I'm not like completely like, what is this? Like, I get it. And parts of it are funny, but there's like a lot of it I think I don't get.
Right. But it's just tied into the nostalgia of that experience.
But I always give people grief over the assumption, not the fact that they like the thing. That's fine.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. The assumption, like, oh yeah, of course everyone went to summer camp. No, not everyone didn't. You didn't miss too much, to be honest. I would go to, like, because I was in the Boy Scouts, so I would go to day camps a lot, for like archery and wood burning and fishing and stuff. And archery was kind of cool, but like,
that sounds badass.
It's a lot of just like, I don't think I'm gonna be applying a lot of these skills later on in my life. Or the one craziest day camp I remember, I had this like 3-day day camp called Camp Phoenix that my mom sent me to, and it was like it was like grief related. It was like grief coping, because my grandfather had died, and my cousin got shot by a cop.
Oh,
so
damn.
They thought I guess they thought I needed to deal with some stuff.
I thought you were going to say they just accidentally put you in grief. Like,
now, that would be pretty funny if I just showed up like, hey, I'm really happy, and then just everyone's like, and then it's like the show dead to me, and it's just like, be like, let's tone it down a little bit.
That happened to me in 9th grade. I got into a fight with another kid in like a class or something, and then the school I went to is this big broken, like the wire-esque bureaucracy,
Sure.
We had to wear like the polo shirts and everything. And so I got pulled out of class the next day. They were like, Flores, come with us. And they take me, they don't tell me where to take me, and they take me to this room, and it's an office with like some counselor and like 2 other students who were like young women, right? And they told me they were taking me to anger management. They were like, you got into a fight, the protocol here is that you have to take an anger management course. Yeah. So I go into anger management, and then I sit down, I'm like, there's these 2 women in here. I'm like, the teacher is like this big black woman or whatever. And I'm like, okay, something seems off. And then she goes, okay, let's begin. She pulls out this big binder. She opens it. She goes, this is a picture of a syphilitic vagina. And I'm like, hey, that's interesting. Why are we looking at this? She's like, you're in sex ed. And I was like, They told me I was supposed to be in anger management. And she's like, your name's Flores. You're on my list. Let's do this. Like, so for like 30 minutes, I just had to hang out with these people and get this like scared straight crash course on STDs that had nothing to do with the fight I got in. God. It was so fucking funny.
That's fucking hilarious. I like how they start with syphilitic vagina.
Yeah, she was supposed to be scaring us. She was like, check this out. It's all green and shit or something.
It's gross. Well, this scared straight. I never had the scared straight. We had, it was called Family Life, was the sex ed in Maryland public schools, but our scared straight was, there was this trailer outside of the main part of the school, and that's where all of the kids who were pregnant were. It just kept them there.
Oh, I remember those weird trailers that would just be like, this is another classroom, it's outside, it's
it's like the early childhood development classes, and like I don't have to take this. And I am glad that I was the loser I was when I was in high school and too afraid to talk to girls. Okay, so you're like a punk rock kid growing up. You're not well off, but there's probably people that have it worse. Is what I'm hearing.
Lower middle class or
lower middle class,
something like that.
And were the politics? Were you politically astute or paying attention to that the entire time, or did that happen later?
Well, I didn't really figure out my politics until like I was a little bit more of a young adult, and actually I went through a weird libertarian phase when I was like in high school and like a little bit older. After the goth thing, I became a 70s guy for like 6 months. I don't know what the fuck was going on with me.
And when you said you were a libertarian, could you explain to me what that meant to you at that time? Because I feel like the word libertarian has evolved over the past couple of years.
Yeah,
where it doesn't mean what it used to mean when I was younger.
Yeah. Oh, well, what's important about the concept of libertarianism is that like that word has meant a few different things, because it was a classical idea and then it became like a more modern, like sort of almost just Republican Tea Party idea. And now it's like kind of the gateway to the alt-right. But so in the beginnings of libertarianism, I mean, it was actually like closely tied with anarchist theory and stuff. Chomsky is self-identified as a like libertarian socialist. Like it is on the political spectrum, sort of the opposite of authoritarian, right? And so like a lot of people get into libertarianism because they fall into this reading a lot about like Stalin and the gulags and stuff, and going, okay, like the state is bad. We communism is bad because it's also like a big fucking fascist mind control thing, yada, 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 right? And that's kind of the basic idea or whatever. It is very much about personal individual freedoms, which is why it's big in Texas. And also, and this is the thing I never figured out until like kind of recently actually, is I didn't realize this, but I was getting a lot of this stuff from my older sister, who was dating a guy who was an expat. He like moved to Texas from Argentina, I think. No, Brazil. South American country, right? And with a lot of those people, and you'll see this right now with like a lot of people that are arguing about Venezuela or whatever, a lot of the rich white people that leave those countries will tell you, we had to flee, it was terrible. And what actually is happening is they're rich and they were like, we're getting taxed more than we wanted to. Right. They're the rich people from those countries, and they're like, oh, all the communists down there are destroying our lives. It's like, no, they're just taking their fair, part of the pie or whatever. And you moved to America, so you didn't have to pay that many taxes, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't really realize. I put it all together later in life. But she was dating this guy, and he was really into it, and she was like going into college and getting really into like poli-sci and stuff like that, political science. And like me and her would talk about stuff. So she was like passing me these Ayn Rand books. So I was reading them and trying to wrap my head around them. And like now I'm really glad that I read all that shit, because now I understand why I don't buy into that stuff.
Yeah, which is, I feel like most people haven't read that stuff and haven't thought critically about it.
Yeah, and like you should know everything if you're going to make an informed choice, and if you think something's your enemy, you should know everything about it.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also like dangerous to like fucking hand a kid an Ayn Rand book, because like leave them alone too long, you might come back and they're like Ben Shapiro or some shit. You're like, oh dear God, what have I done?
Right. There's always that like let's temper this. And you said you went to college, but you ended up thinking it was a waste of time. Where did you go to school?
So I went off, once I got out of high school, I went to San Antonio for a year to I always wanted to go to UT. That was my big plan, right? I was going to use this weird magnet school, get into UT. And then from there, like, I think that I really thought, like, that college was for smart people and that, like, I was going to be like Daria, you know? And like, because, I mean, I grew up in, like, kind of a shitty working class area and, you know, honestly, like, I think I got a little bit of a snobby complex about certain shit. Cause, like, you know, I'm also, like, half Mexican and, like, hung out with, like, Mexican people and shit and people of color growing up and stuff. But the reason I'm, like, a fucking rock and roll dude is because I made a choice, I think, at one point to be like, I don't hang out with people that are, like, drug dealers and stuff and, like, in gangs and shit like that. So I hung out with nerds that are into indie rock and all this white stuff, right?
Sure.
And I think I developed a snob complex and was like, I'm going to escape from the hood and I'm going to go, like, to college and, like, be a smart person, like, learn all this stuff, right? But then what happened is, so I graduated, I went to UTSA for a year in San Antonio and then I transferred. I finally got into UT and I was like, UT, this is where I'm going to, like, be a smart person or whatever.
Yeah.
I got there and what I met was the hordes and hordes of shitty suburban, like, middle class and upper class white kids that just, like, graduate and they just go to college because it's what you do.
Right.
And I was surrounded by them and I remember thinking, like, these people don't give a fuck about any of this. Like, these people are just getting wasted through 4 years. They're all going to get business degrees and they're going to go off.
They can coast and kind of take it for granted.
And they're going to go rule the world, you know?
Right.
And it's like all of these things that you have in your head about college being this meritocracy where you get rewarded for working hard and, like, being smart and all this stuff. You start to realize after a while, that's not true. If you study something really interesting, you'll probably make no money. If you go into business school, you'll make $1 billion for being a thief, essentially, you know? All this stuff, right? And so I remember thinking, like, oh no, actually, like, cholo fucking gangbanger dudes I knew, those people were actually smarter. Like, I should have hung out with them. Like, they were actually probably more interesting than these just, like, hordes of college kids. College is one of the things that, like, caused me to start getting really into all these class politics and all this stuff because
that's when it was like you started seeing it almost in microcosm.
Well, it smashed this dream I had, which was I really believed, like, I believed what our parents' generation told us, you know, which is that, like,
work hard, get a good job.
And college is the key. That, like, you'll make 10 times more money if you go to college, you know. And it worked for their generations. I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Like, baby boomers, you know, like, college costs fucking $3,000 or some shit. And then they use those degrees to get more scarce jobs. But, like, all the financial crisis stuff happened, you know, right around the time that my generation was graduating from college. I, at that point, was, like, dropping out or whatever. But, like, now, I mean, I fucking know people with, like, PhDs that are bartenders and stuff. And so, like, experiencing all that over the course of college caused me to realize, like, oh yeah, like that everything you believed about American society being a system that rewards you for having done well and worked harder than other people and being exceptional, all that stuff, I don't think it's true.
Yeah.
And that's
kind of what the dream of capitalism is sold.
Exactly.
From an early age.
Yeah.
And then you kind of realize that that's not necessarily how it works. You know, there's...
Yeah, and you know, you talk about the American dream, I mean, it's like... It's not just like, you know, redneck, middle of the country Republicans and stuff that believe in that. It's also like families of immigrants, which I'm come from and stuff, and like everybody. I mean, the people in your life that are, you know, supposedly Democrats and whatever, and like everyone kind of believes in this concept. And when you have the rug pulled out from under you, and you go, wait a minute, across the board, everyone's getting this one thing wrong. You know, then you're off in a really interesting direction that, like, I mean, I think more of my generation is sort of kind of catching up with this stuff, but
well, and also this idea that, like, you know, my dad's generation, my dad didn't go to college, but he had a 6-figure job for 30 years as a shift operator at a nuclear power plant.
Whoa.
Yeah, like, you know, he made good money, but it's physically hard work. He wanted me to work there too, and I was like, that's not the life I want.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's what I think your classic kind of whatever classic idea of what you think an American is, he's that,
Yeah.
worked a physically demanding job, made well, was able to retire, put me through college. But then also, loves his guns and is trying to go off the grid now. He has this battery that can run his whole house on electricity, so he's off the power grid or something.
Yeah.
But
it's a lot of libertarian types take up that same dream, but off the grid thing.
Yeah. But then there are those high paying like manufacturing or those high paying trade jobs are going away.
Yeah.
So that's going away, but then also this idea that college degree automatically equals a certain base level is kind of not the reality either.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of us are just sort of the Titanic just sank and we're all freezing to death, and we're just trying to find our piece of furniture that we can get on. That we can get on to get out of the water until the lifeboat comes.
Yeah, the floating door.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel that way. And like, I know I'm talking a lot in like political terms or whatever, but also on a personal level, when I was like, okay, well, fuck this. I don't think I'm going to, become a whatever in college. I don't think I found a, professional route. When I was like, I'm just going to really like stick it out and try to do comedy around the same time. I mean, that was when I was like, because I had this weird crisis in college, well, the reason I had it, I guess, rather is what I'm trying to describe, is that I felt a lot of pressure to like that I was supposed to like do something and make a lot of money because of like when you're from a family of like immigrants or poor people or whatever. They're
yeah,
like,
I feel like the pressure is a little bit more.
Like you have to, none of us got to, and therefore you have to, and also fucking make us money so we don't die poor and all this stuff. And it's like it's way too much. Plus, like. There's like Catholic guilt coming from weird, Mexican side of my family's Catholic and all this stuff. And like, also like my brother's kind of disabled. My sister is a woman. Therefore my shitty, old school parents are like, nope, you're the guy. Like you're supposed to be the fucking dude who's going to carry on this, lineage or whatever. So like I had a complete crisis with that and was like, you know what, like fuck that. Like I'm just not going to, I'm not going to let this like live in my head all day. 'Cause it's like completely, just like making me miserable. And that's when I was like, okay, these two things at the same time happening, this personal crisis and this like crisis of like, I don't think this is how society works.
Yeah.
That's where I went, I'm just going to fucking go for it because what's the other option?
Yeah.
And that's when I was like,
that's nihilism as a inspirational tool.
I think that existentialism even maybe could be something that you would describe that as like a positive nihilism or whatever. Like,
yeah, I think about the positive. I feel like a positive nihilist. That's like sort of like my core. Like I don't let it pop out a lot, but that's kind of how I feel. It's like, well, you should just do whatever you want to do because you're gonna die someday, and the planet will probably catch on fire before that happens.
I think from that point of view a lot, right? And I think at that time in my life, I was like, well, I didn't kill myself, therefore anything I do today is zero stakes, right? Like, whatever. Now you're free to do whatever you want because literally anything is better than having died. And I think about that way a lot when it comes to comedy. Sometimes people ask me, like, why are you so reckless on Twitter? Like, why do you start all these fights and shit? And it's like, well, here's the math on that. Here's how that works out. Every day I think about quitting comedy. And then I go, well, I didn't quit comedy, so anything I do, what does it matter? Because the other option was having quit comedy. Like a lot of times people are like, why are you so outspoken about shit? And it's like, well, if I couldn't be outspoken about what I believe about this industry and about the world of it, then I would quit comedy. But I didn't quit comedy, so I guess I shall just say those things as if I had already quit comedy. Like, it's kind of a logical loop, but it's like it always ends with like, well, I'm not going to quit, so I might as well just do it,
Yeah. No, I think that makes perfect sense because I've thought about this a lot too. Also, as part of like the nihilistic part, I was thinking about and I've said this before, but I would go back and I'd listen to Lenny Bruce, and I know he's one of the greatest stand-ups ever, right?
Right.
But it's so of its time, and I'm so far removed from it that it doesn't have the same punch. And I thought about all of these like really great monologue jokes and all these tweets that go, people who get tweets that go viral. It's so like of the moment.
Yeah.
It's there and it's cool and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So I have, and again, also how I feel I've changed artistically is that I'm trying to create something that is a little more evergreen, has a little more like tangible staying power. Even though Canal Aurora was like, are you going to make your kids keep paying your Libsyn account? But,
yeah.
So you start comedy in Austin. So you go from San Antonio to Austin.
Yeah.
And so my knowledge of Austin is Velveeta Room, Cap City Comedy Club, Laugh Stop before it closed, and then there's this cool
Last stop was Houston.
Last stop was Houston. I'm sorry. And then there's this other like black box theater in Austin that I had a really great show at a bunch of years ago with Bryson Turner. Did you ever meet him?
Yeah, I knew Bryson. Don't know him anymore. I don't really know where he went.
I haven't seen him in years. I think he's married. He's probably doing all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't seen him in a long time.
There were a couple black box theaters. There was one that was called the New Movement Theater. Now it's called the Fallout. And then there was another that was more of an improv thing downtown. And its name is escaping me. Mm-hmm. But the New Movement was man, there's a lot. I don't give a shit. I'll spill the beans. I was about to stop myself from gossiping. I was like, wait a minute, this guy fucking sucks. So there was this guy named Chris True who came into town, and he started Cold Town. Cold Town started when a bunch of improv people.
Yeah, that's what it was.
It was Cold Town?
Yeah, I think so.
So Cold Town came in after Hurricane Katrina. All these comedy, like, people from this like improv scene and sketch scene or whatever in New Orleans came in, and then they opened Cold Town, and Cold Town is actually a big boon to us as stand-ups because they knew how to put together like a really good, like, it was small theater comedy night. Like their one night they would do stand-up, and it was packed, but it was also packed because it was like they were starting a cult. I mean, the audience was like their students who they conned into paying a bunch of money to be like sketch or improv students.
Sure.
And then now it's like, well, you spent all this money on this, you better hang out here every night. I think you're actually required to watch like 2 shows a week or something if you did.
Oh, wow.
Improv, I don't trust any improv theater, like UCB, fucking any of them. Like they're all just structured in a way that's like, there's a financial incentive that is kind of predatory in my opinion. And like,
I could see how you feel that way.
This one, eventually there was some big controversy where like this guy Chris True got into some weird drama with the other people that owned it, and they went, okay, well, fuck it. He was like, you can keep Cold Town. I'm gonna go start this thing called the New Movement, and it's another black box theater that was like kind of downtown. And it was like, whatever, I didn't give a shit about any of this because it wasn't affecting me. But then this guy decided that he wanted to become like in charge of all of Austin comedy. And so at the same time as all this stuff was going down, that's when I was starting comedy rooms and like music venues and punk venues and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I was getting involved with this company called Transmission Entertainment that put on this music festival called Fun Fest that over the last like 10 years or whatever kind of had like that arc where like there was like a moment when it was like, man, music festivals are kind of cool. Like they're, you can do like a punky one or whatever. And like some of them are still around, some of them FunFest no longer is, but they started from scratch, and then they got a little bit bigger every year, and they were booking like cool shit, like you go see like the Jesus Lizard or something, and like
Jesus. I think Danzig played.
Danzig was one year. It was a big fucking funny controversy because he was a prima donna and he wouldn't come on stage.
My friend I think shot the video for was a camera operator for that, and he wouldn't go up because until he got a Wendy's chicken sandwich and French onion soup.
French onion soup, that's what it was. Yeah. So there was like that. Also, I was working in bars. I'm a hardcore fucking service industry dude, and like so what I would do is every year I'd alternate. I would either pitch something to FunFest and go like, let me do something on this stage this year, or I would work. And when I would work, I just fucking work 2 of the 3 nights, get a free pass, go the next day. Like I loved it. Like it was like the combination of all the punk music and stuff, all my service industry pals, and then also me being able to fucking pitch and produce like comedy shit because they had a comedy stage.
Yeah.
So they would have like us locals like during a good portion of the day, and then at night, fucking Reggie Watts would close shit down, or you get to see Patton do a set, or like David Cross or something like that. And it was really cool. But then like every year, this fucking Chris True guy started to horn in more, and because the comedy stage was like it was cool that they had a comedy stage,
Yeah.
but any music festival that's like also got a comedy stage, it's going to be the one that they think about less.
Sure.
So he kept like pitching them like, let me produce the entire stage, the entire weekend or whatever. And you guys won't even have to think about it. And eventually I think that they kind of sold it to him. They were like, all right, you just take this off our hands. And then eventually it just became the Chris True stage. And instead of like, you're like, I had like plans. I was like, I want to book Eddie Pepitone and Kyle Kinane and fucking Hannibal and all this cool stuff. And I want to have like an Adult Swim thing and like,
that would have been great.
And it, and after a while, when Chris True kind of wrested control of the whole thing, it was just what it was is he would get 300 people in for free because they were his students, and he would go, we're all going to do this big mass like sketch where just everyone is holding up a cardboard sign or you're dressed as a fucking tomato or whatever.
Oh, God.
And then you all get free passes, and it depleted all the resources that were available for like comedians to get into the fucking show. You couldn't get in because all of his fucking students were now representing the entirety of comedy in the scene. Yada, yada, yada. So I always had this power struggle with this guy, and I always fucking hated him. And then, guess what? A couple years ago, Me Too'd.
I think I remember hearing something about that.
And he's just in New Orleans now, acting like it didn't happen, and just like still trying to do like local news commercials with like the local hockey team or whatever. And it's insane. He's a fucking sociopath, and he's just acting like he didn't get accused of like, sexual coercion or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was one of those improv guys that was like, basically had power over his own students,
Yeah, and that's a setup for that kind of situation. That's just almost bred to create a circumstance where you're gonna try to see how far you can go with abusing this position that you built for yourself.
I wish there was a way to do improv. I'm not an improv person, but for people that like it, I wish there was a way that they could do it without it having to go through this like power structure of the comedy school.
I know. Well, that's why I feel like stand up at least works like, I'm not going to say stand up's a meritocracy, but it works on this like mafia-esque like handshake. Hey, he's a friend of he or she's a friend of ours. Put him up, or you should book this person. There's that kind of like handshake sort of analogy. Whereas the improv school and like sketch comedy specifically, like this whole path to people wanting to get on SNL is like a corporate structure. You stand out in your class, you appease the teacher who's like this one person.
Yeah.
And it's almost seems kind of set up, and especially with a bunch of like insecure people trying to get any sort of resting for any sort of control they can have over their own destiny. It is going to create situations like that, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, but not to excuse stand-up. Like, stand-up is a very imperfect system too, and it does.
Oh, the whole like, system is flawed.
It's not as though have not been bad things that have happened in the world of stand-up.
Oh,
often
of course.
For those reasons too, because there's just different dynamics and stuff. But like, the dynamics of improv are just so offensive to me. Like, it just seems like something could be done to where it's not just like such a transparent like. It's like Scientology,
Yeah. The only other reason I was putting a plus in stand-up's column is because there exists that other thing, but then you get these little Napoleons also that create this kind of thing. And so my question to you is, so you're producing shows in Austin. Are you thinking you're going to stay there? When does New York come to in your mind?
The more I sort of like. I mean, I still like when I was like, sticking my foot out and going like, all right, I'm going to take this first step and kind of shove off into this little, into the open sea, and I don't know what the fuck's going to happen. I was still a little trepidatious and like, in the early years was like, maybe I will quit this eventually and do something else. Maybe I'll try to go back to college. I don't know. Maybe I'll get a trade or something. Or like, also in order to survive, I basically had to just teach myself a lot of shit about, like, I had to pick a trade kind of,
right,
and one that would work for being a person that needs gigs all the time or whatever. So I went really hardcore into the service industry. I because up until that point I had been working like bullshit jobs, like delivering pizzas for like $7 an hour and then whatever tips you make that day, right?
Yeah.
And like making no money. And I was like, okay, well, I need a plan, and my plan, it needs to be that like I can't work for minimum wage, and then like you can do that and live in a place like Austin. Well, not anymore, but like back then you could. But I planned from the get go, like, okay, what I'm going to do is incubate here, get really good at this, and also learn a trade that I can take anywhere. And so, with the concept of a New York or LA somewhere down the line in my head, I was like, if I work my way up through like the bars here and then like learn to tend bar, then I can go to New York, find a job, set up from there, and have that be my base, and then just kind of do stand up in my free time or whatever. That was always my my little map, And so I always kind of knew, like, probably wanted to move to New York. There was obviously the other thing, which is LA, where most of my friends went because there's more jobs there and stuff. And maybe just people like the lifestyle better, the driving and stuff like that. I hate driving, so I was like, and also just like New York's cool. There's another part of it was like outside of comedy, I just kind of want to move to New York.
Yeah, same. I've always thought New York is like the cool place to be, the coolest place to be.
Yeah, so I started to zero in on it around my like mid to late 20s, and I moved here when I was like 27. I had kind of a victory lap in Austin where I was just like, I was already like as annoying as I am here. Like I was already like kind of beefed up with like the comedy clubs there and like the mainstream like bookers. I still have a relationship with those people. Like sometimes I'll do like South by Southwest or something, but like a lot of times I was like, no, fuck you. I'm not going to bite my tongue if I think you're dicking over my friends or whatever, or me. So, I was like doing all this indie comedy shit. And then tending bar, and then after a while, I was like, "Oh fuck!" I'm like making pretty good money at the bar. I work at one of the coolest bars, People know who I am. I could go into a bar, people would like buy me free beers and shit. And like,
nice.
There was a good year when like me and my buddy Chris Cubis and my friend Blake Midget were like, man, we're like pretty popular like locally in this fucking scene,
Yeah. It's like your Kitchen Confidential era.
Yeah. It was real fun. And then I used all that. I had made the classic mistake everyone makes, which is that I thought, like, I'll use this momentum and swing it into New York. And then that'll give me this leg up here. And then obviously you get here and you realize no one gives a fuck how popular you are in another city.
Right. You got to start all over.
You have to start over immediately. You also have to start over kind of creatively because, like, when you're like that popular in another city, your material goes over well because everyone knows who you are, or just because you're so confident that you think everyone knows who you are. Yeah, that you're just like, it's an entirely different act to do stand up, and like you go here and you're like, okay, I got to do like Creek open mics and shit. Yep, and it completely resets you, So I moved here and I was like, and then that took a long time for me to just reset and recalibrate and refigure out everything. But I don't know. I went on tour a bunch of times having lived here when I first lived here because like I had already had the mechanisms in place to be like, I can call 3 friends and go book a bunch of venues across the country and shit. Yeah. So that's always been there. And then for a long time in New York, I was just like, man, I can do stand up everywhere except for this place that I decided to move to. Like it's the hardest stage here,
Yeah. That's what's always blown my mind. Like listening to, this is going to be an odd example, but we're in it. Like listening to like Jamie Kilstein talk about how he couldn't get booked in New York, but he's like playing the Sydney Opera House and like and Edinburgh Fringe and all this stuff, is just so bizarre to me. Like or like Kevin McCaffrey has done David Letterman. I had him on, and like the fact that there are people who have TV credits that can't get on certain bar shows in Los Angeles really makes me want to like rip my eyeballs out. Like there's a certain point because like I don't know if there's anybody that ever asked me when I was producing a show at the Creek. I don't know if there's anybody I ever told no to as far as doing a show. And obviously none of those people were like, like problem like sexual assaulters or anything like that. So because no one was none of those people that I know of were reaching out to me, but I just wasn't that precious about it. It's like, okay, if they bomb, that literally doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. But now I book with like a group of people, so it's like someone will go, hey, maybe not, but it's never me. Like I don't even want to advertise this too hard, but like, yeah, I don't think that much about it. It's just a fucking spot on a show, and you know, if you hit me up and you're not like terrible, I'll probably at least consider it, or you know, nothing's gonna really. It takes a lot for me to go like, no, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. So tell me a little bit, and there's a couple other things I'm curious about. Tell me about DIY touring. So if I wanted to like find like 3 cities and start booking tours in different places across America, what are some things that I definitely have to make sure that I do?
I think that like social media is a big part of it. That it sucks, you know. Social media is driving us all insane, and I have a lot of friends that are like, "I'm going to shut down my Facebook account," and I'm like, you know, I'm happy for you. How are you going to do comedy, you know, or how are you going to like do like this type of comedy, you know?
Yeah.
Almost consider it like a negative byproduct of the damn job that I have to keep all this shit up, and I'm extremely online. Like a lot of people give me shit over it for being like, you know, you tweet all the time or whatever. But like, yeah, but
you're funny. So
I mean, I feel like I enjoy what I'm putting out on there, you know. But also the other thing is constantly having this presence means that like right now I could go like if we were like, all right, let's book a tour. It's going to start in like Boston. I could just go on Twitter and go like, yo, do I know anyone in Boston? And someone would tweet at me, and then I would start the process of me like hunting down this fucking thing. And then I could, you know, cross-reference that person with like 10 other people and go, is this guy cool? Is this the fucking cool guy in your scene? Or is this like a weirdo, you know? And from there, I mean, like, you can just do it all from your damn phone. Whereas, you know, we're really taking for granted, like in the Black Flag days, you would have to like have a weird ratty notebook full of phone numbers and names and stuff and go to like a fucking house landline phone and like sit there and call everyone and then drive to the place that day not knowing if they fucking forgot who you are or like you know so like I mean, and are you making money on these tours, or are you like netting out? Like how does the process of like getting like your guaranteed money happen? So another good tool for having done this is knowing a lot of musicians, right?
Right.
The first guy I ever went on tour with is still a hardcore road guy, and road in this sense. I mean, he does like punk shows and stuff. His name's JT Habersat, and he honestly like kind of pioneered a lot of this stuff because he was a music booker forever, and he was a comic, and then after a while he went, oh, I've got this little black book. Yeah. If I wanted to book something, I could make all these deals with people, and they know who I am, and yada yada yada. So he started booking comedy shows, and we would like, you know, or we'd be like a block that went on before a band or something, or we'd be our own thing and stuff. And so through touring with him, and then also, you know, via him getting kind of connected to like the Doug Stanhope circuit, like all those fucking people, and like my buddy Mishka Shubali that I tour with, I've been, as a comic, able to pick up all the tools and like lingo and mechanisms and things that they use. And like one of those is like the concept of a guarantee versus a door deal. This might not be something that is immediately obvious to a comedian who's going off and going, how do I pitch this show to this bar? You know, how do I pitch them this idea that we're going to come in and we're either going to bring in a certain amount of people or we're not. But like having done this for a while, I started to realize like, oh, okay, if it's a Monday night in a shithole town, you get a guarantee, because if you tell them, you know, I want half the door, but there's no door, you're fucked. If you get a guarantee and you work out the guarantee with the person and you go, I don't know, you know, how much money this is going to make you, but I am bringing in 5 people and I'll make sure they get drunk or whatever, or just like they hang out and have a good time, then like you can sort of start to whittle away the little, you know, mathematical edges on that and stuff, and like kind of make sure everyone's taken care of and stuff. There's also situations that where like I'll look at a town and go like, you know, this venue seems cool, but they're going to need to pay staff a certain amount for this night. It's like a Friday night. We're going to lose so much money on that, you know what? I know someone who does house shows here. That's a way better idea. We'll just do a fucking party in someone's house that is used to having house parties, you know.
And then just set up a mic and do the show there.
Yeah, I mean I've been doing that a lot in the last few years, and like it's funny, like I'll joke about it, like yeah, my career's tanking because I'm doing house shows, but it's actually like no, this is actually a better idea, like half the time than just doing like a venue that you know. I mean, a lot because we're DIY. Like a lot of the times, these venues they don't seem like a bad idea to somebody else because like a lot of musicians right now have like a manager who's doing all this stuff for you, so you're not even seeing all these numbers fly around and stuff. So you might not even realize you're getting put into a bad situation, or maybe they're making more money off it because they have this fucking weird manager, but they take a cut of it or whatever. Who fucking knows, you know?
Yeah.
Something I think about a lot when I think about this stuff is, you know, it's like, what is success as a comic? A lot of people think, well, it's, you know, getting mega rich and famous, and that surely is, you know. A lot of people think that it's just the concept of you can quit your day job and just be paid to do comedy. That's kind of what it is. That's kind of where I am, and then whatever. There's like a different sliding gradient from there. But I was thinking about my friend Ben Kronberg because
I know Ben.
I love Ben. He's like one of my favorite comics. I love to watch him. He's also nothing like me as a comic, so I love to watch him because like it's just it's an interesting show because I'm like I have no idea what's going on in your brain, dude. You're a fucking wizard, you know.
Yeah, and that makes for a more interesting show. You don't want just like 5 people with like the same kind of thing.
I have lots of friends where I'm like, okay, we're similar types, and we can kind of have a friendship over that. But I also have a lot of friends where I'm like, I like the fact that we are so different, you know.
Yeah.
But Ben, when I was like kind of moving here and coming up and figuring all this stuff out, you know, in my head, he's a famous fucking comic. He's got specials on TV and stuff.
Yeah.
He travels. And then I like met him and I was like, oh, this guy's kind of homeless. Like he's crashing on someone's couch. He's, you know, he's not really like balling out like us. Like me and my friends we just finished waiting tables and we're going to go to a bar and spend like $50, you know?
Yeah.
But he's operating on this razor thin profit margin, and that's how he's able to be what I'm perceiving as this big successful comic.
Right.
So then I think about that and I go like, I don't know if I want to be that. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But when I book these tours, at least when I'm on tour, I'm like, yeah, okay. I feel like Ben Kronberg right now. You know, I made $50 tonight or whatever, and like half that's going to go in the gas tank, and you know, but tomorrow I'll make $300, and somehow it'll come out.
Yeah.
As long as the money looks somewhat similar to what I would have been making bartending, I'm like, this is it. Like that's fine. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, tour. I've never toured like music or comedy. I've always my thought is I will do it when it financially makes sense, because you know my life is at a very different place right now. I'm getting married. I've got this apartment that we're sitting in.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've got nothing.
I have to think about it. I have to think about it in a less reckless way. And I'm not saying your approach is reckless.
No, I am though. You're right. I mean, that's literally like what I was describing when the fucking feds came to my house. I was like, this is the house of someone who's like going to be in New Hampshire tomorrow and doesn't give a shit about it. That's part of the Faustian deal I've made. That's like part of the sacrifices. You know what, dude? I love cats. I want a cat so bad. I can't have one because I'm never home. You know, like that's part of this.
Yeah. Well, maybe when you're like at a place where you can pump the brakes a little bit, you can get that cat.
Yeah. Or when I find a friend who lives close enough that I can and I have an extra $30 to con them into taking care of my cat, I guess. But I don't want to think about it. That's like also like just why I am the way I'm. Like I'm describing this like shitty homeless vagabond thing.
And do you feel like does the podcast help with touring?
Yeah, no, it changed everything.
Yeah, because like I again like I feel like we're peers somewhat, even though we don't like run in the exact same circles. But I'm always happy to see you when I see you.
Of course, likewise.
And I've seen you kind of like, you know, every now and then you'll have a tweet go viral, or I've started to, you know, when I was like, oh, Jake's podcast is doing really, really well. So that kind of
that changed.
Helps inform the road also. I
mean, that honestly, like that changed everything. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm like, oh, I'm at that. I feel better than that Ben Kronberg thing I was just describing, because like the Patreon thing, man. I mean, it's set up in a way where it's like, well, now it's my fault if I don't book a tour.
Sure.
Because like I got like the base I needed out of it or whatever. And I mean, I don't want to sell myself short. It took a lot of work to get there or whatever. But like, yeah, I mean, once we got there, I'm kind of done. Like, I have to remind myself every once in a while, like, don't be a sad sack. Like, you did it. This is the fucking what we're all going after the whole time. You know?
That's that DIY. That's that kind of like do-it-yourself, oddly Republican, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality that the entertainment business has. There are no gatekeepers, but this is this is a section of the model now. So I think that's great. I got a couple questions about Patreon, and this might be a good way to close on this. And then, so I'm about to hit episode 100 on this pretty soon. So, and it's starting to get to a place where like I'm starting to see a little bit of growth. So I want to start thinking about Patreon ideas. What have you found what have you found as far as the podcast and monetization? What have you learned? What advice can you give me? Because I know bonus episodes are in a lot of people's model. I don't know if this kind of show lends itself to bonus episodes super easily. So what can you tell me about your experience with Patreon?
Well, I think what we're creating is parasocial entertainment on some level. Like on one level, it's not. I mean, on one level, it's like, you know, what you do when you're a comedian and you start a podcast is that you create a platform for yourself. Right. Suddenly, I used to work as a journalist a lot, and it would be kind of frustrating because if I had an idea, I would have to come up with a pitch, and then I would have to go to 10 different people and go like, hey, what do you think about this? And now I don't. Now, because I have a platform that is getting listens and stuff, I am sort of like, oh, if I have an idea for an article, I could write it, or I could edit it into like an audio thing, piece it together. And now I've got my own little fucking, you know, media thing, Flores Enterprises or whatever, you know, like fucking, this is, you know, what I would be pitching this to like Vice or fucking whatever before that. But the reason that you get listeners is, I think this is where a lot of comedians go wrong, is that they think that it's way more about the content being super original or about it competing in some sort of marketplace. What you're doing is, if you got fans, they're loyal, right? And so they'll just listen to whatever you put out. They'll get into the habit of listening to it too. And I mean, I say that as someone who is like a huge fan of podcasts, but also I'm aware that like when I open my phone and I'm like, what do I feel like listening to today? I pick my favorite ones. I pick like fucking Chapo Trap House and Last Podcast on the Left, because I'm like, I'm hungover, I'm on a train on the way to work, I know this is going to be the thing that I get out of it every time. And part of that is just like, I mean, part of it is like, you know, the people. And I don't know, I go back and forth on this because you could be really cynical about it and be like, you know, you've got these people that are just sort of like hooked on you, and that's kind of like weird. But I mean, it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, that's what you get out of having artists that you like anyway, you know?
Yeah.
When you like Prince or something, I mean, it's not that you're like objectively, scientifically listening to every single new album and going like, okay, you know, did this note make my brain experience pleasure and yada, yada, yada. You know what Prince is after a while. You're like, I like this guy's whole fucking thing, you know? Yeah. Like his whole oeuvre or whatever. So like, I think about Howard Stern a lot as being one of the first, like he's kind of the first podcaster. He wasn't podcasting. He was on the radio.
Well, he was on the radio, and he was doing the kind of more conversational, thoughtful interviews.
And he had Howard Stern heads, right? He had people that fucking like they needed something to listen to on their commute, and they were like, I know this is gonna be better than NPR or the weather or whatever.
That was church for them.
They knew every fucking person in that room's name, you know? Yeah. I used to do the same thing in Austin. There was this guy, Charlie Hodge, that was on, and when I was delivering pizzas during the day, because I would deliver pizzas during the day and do stand-up at night, there was a guy who had the noon hour, like one, I think at some point he had like 2 hours straight, and it was my favorite thing to listen to because I knew his sense of humor, and it was funny. It was like, it's a good deal, right? So that's what you're selling people here, right? And that's why, like, you know, if you just set up like content and then bonus content and people like you enough, they'll go like, okay, I respect that half of the deal. Like I that makes sense for me to give $5 and get extra shit out of this because I'm already like in the habit of listening to this.
Yeah.
I think that's how it works. I mean, I think that's like what happened with us because, like, you know, what I was able to do with my show essentially is just inject rocket fuel into it, in that I had 1 million Twitter followers already. Fucking, I'm on Twitter all day. They know what they're getting or whatever. And then I was like, oh, if I can just, combine that and the show we're already making and go, hey, do you guys like this? If enough you listen to it and fucking 10% of you or whatever give us money, then that'll give us enough money to make more of it. And the whole thing just grows from there. And that seems like a pretty fair, like horizontal, flat, like everyone's kind of getting something out of it deal, in my opinion. And that's why I like it. But I don't think that you need to reinvent the wheel. I think you just need to kind of like, it's part of a weird part of being an artist. Is what you're selling is you.
Yeah, because what I've been thinking, and I like this YouTuber Chris Stuckman. He does he reviews movies, but he's not a dick about it. Like I get my ire, who's been drawing my ire on the internet lately, are frustrated nerds who like to criticize movies that they can't do because they can't do it.
Yeah.
But he's not like that. He's fairly, like, he will tell you if he likes it or doesn't like it, but he also reviews movies even if he doesn't like it. He does it in a way where you could maybe think, oh, he might not like it, but I might.
Yeah.
That's which I appreciate. So he's got these like, so his Patreon's got like all these different levels. So I was thinking about like what I mostly talk about on this show. And it's like, I talk about travel a lot. I talk about food and I talk about music. So what can I offer you by myself that is related to that? Cause I feel like if I make money on anything that involves other people, I have to share it with them because I don't want to be like one of the,
Yeah.
So I might just start, have like a list of my favorite places to eat for where I've traveled, but to then tell people not to ruin it by telling too many others. And then I like making mixtapes, so I might start making mixtape episodes where I just will list a bunch of songs and why I think they're a good mixtape for a certain moment in your life.
Yeah, I like that.
I don't know what I'm going to do for like $10 a month, but I know when I record an album, because I want to do like a acoustic, like super like early aughts acoustic emo EP, and then I want to record a comedy album in the next year or two.
Cool.
And I know that stuff's going to be free for on the $10 feed. But do you have plans to like record an album, or do you even want to?
Yeah, I just recorded one actually.
Awesome.
I recorded one in February when I was on tour, and I honestly I've just been sitting around like commiserating over like when I'm gonna sit down and work on it, because like I'm one of those people that like I do stand up all the time and I hate listening to it and editing my own voice and stuff. It's stressful for me, so like it's on my kind of to-do list this week, but it should be out sometime this year. The album being so when all that ice shit went down last year, I went on tour immediately after that, wrote a bunch of material on the tour about like the ice stuff, and also the other half of it I would say is like my act up until that point that I had just been percolating and then like was waiting to put onto something like a special or an album or whatever. So it's a good like chunk of all of the material I've been doing for the last couple of years, and I already recorded it. I'm just kind of gonna go through the motions pretty soon to put it out. I don't really have a specific date of when. I thought about putting it out on Cinco de Mayo this year, but then I got lazy. And
I hear you. Awesome, man. And your podcast is called?
It's called Pod Damn America. It's a play on the Pod Save America podcast, who we are smarter than, or at least less evil, I would say. Sure. And also it's a reference to the Reverend Wright speech, God Damn America. Pretty clever, right? It's about socialism and leftist politics and radical shit, and also just culture and stuff like that. And it's also goth for no reason. It just happened.
It just happens. It's not connected to anything. It's just
yeah.
Well, cool, man. Dude, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. If you ever, I will read up if you ever need me to be a guest on your show, which I will read up, and I'll have some well-researched opinions.
Well, we're also like pretty dumb as far as there's a scene of leftist podcasts right now, and I would say we're one of the dumbest ones. So I don't make people do homework. We also do a lot of dumb shit, like just watch a movie and then make fun of it.
That's more in line with what I'm good at.
Yeah, I don't insult comedians' intelligence by saying like that you'll need to read up, but I also don't like giving people homework. So we're a pretty flat, like, we're just a platform. So anything weird idea that you and me could come up with for an episode, we'll just go do it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, dude. And thank you again. And you're on Twitter at?
My on everything is feral jokes, like feral animal, jokes like jokes. It's an anagram for my name, Jake Flores.
Awesome, man. Well, I feel like I got to make you a J-punk list at some point because all my favorite punk is from Japan right now.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. Not even specifically real punk. Like I run the gamut of very poppy to more skate punk, but
sure.
I got to make, there's stuff that I just need someone else to talk to about. So I need someone else to hear it.
Sure. No, I'm into it.
Excellent. Dude, thank you so much.
Thank you.